Welcome to the Inside Bassmaster Podcast presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. If you haven't, you better get in while the days are few to get in on the Bass Cat giveaway they're doing on their website. Go to Black Rifle and check it out there. You should be able to see the link in our description as well. Kyle, Jessie, thank you for joining me today as our co-host. I'm Ronnie Moore as usual. And today we have the Opens Winning Ways podcast. We've had a lot of tournaments this season. Some of these Opens will go into the fall, but we're catching back up with some of our winners from earlier in the season, the third and fourth stops of the St. Croix Bassmaster Open season at Bugs Island and Wheeler Lake. Powell Kemp will be our first guest, the winner of Bugs Island, and then later on we'll have Adam Rasmussen, the winner of Wheeler Lake, join us. So, Kyle, it's always refreshing to see some of these takes because some guys jump in these Opens with elite qualification on their mind. Some guys jump in with a classic spot in mind and no hopes of the elites. They just want to stay doing what they're doing and fish a couple Opens in one division, be able to go to the Classic, and that's exactly what Powell Kemp has done. We'll get to hear more about that in just a few minutes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess really when you think about it, we've had at least two different locals, win Opens this year, which is cool to see. Obviously, there's plenty of guys that obviously see the schedule come out and are excited to see their home lake on the schedule. Powell Kemp is certainly one of those guys and got the job done there at Bugs Island.
This was the lake, so we can disclose this. We're not just working friends, Kyle. We're friends for the most part outside of work as well. And we have a Snapchat group that we call the Fishing Fam, a lot of washed up old college anglers and a bunch of people from my neck of the woods in North Carolina. And we were all so stoked to see Bugs Island on the schedule. Kerr Lake, if you don't know about it, right there around the Virginia, northern North Carolina area. But our group chat was so excited for it. And Jack Dice, the guy who previewed it, got fourth place. And honestly, we saw a lot of what we've talked about in our group and in the preview play out. It was actually a very, very good event. It's not gonna be the highest weight event. That's just not what Bugs Island produces. But man, the weights were close. It was some cool ways of catching them, especially the way Powell Kemp won it.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I hate about this tournament is that the way that it played out. I wish that we would have had cameras in the boats. Obviously, the last event of each series in the Opens will have cameras on, but just the way that tournament played out and the things that played and the way the guys caught them, it just seemed like such a cool place. Obviously a place I've never been to, not being an East Coast guy, but certainly a fun looking lake to fish, and definitely wish we would have got to see it live. But even the photos and all the reports and stories and stuff, I was just ate up with. Obviously it's been a minute since that tournament, but it certainly was a really good one.
Yeah, first week of May, we had the Bassmaster Open there at Bugs Island. So that means there's going to be some maybe fish on bed. There's going to be some shad spawn stuff going on. A lot of different things could be happening, maybe some early deep fish. And obviously just fishing down the bank type patterns could possibly work out. And that's what we kind of saw transpire throughout the week. Our guest today, Powell Kemp, we mentioned it. We just talked about how Bugs Island would play out. We talked about our group chat and everything that knew all about Bugs Island. We were excited to see this go down. And Powell Kemp, welcome to the show. Congratulations on your victory. And you have to go to one more event that's coming up very soon, and you'll be Classic qualified official. Congratulations, man.
Yeah, a few weeks away and one more cast to make.
I'll have to say you are probably the closest Opens pro or elite angler from where I grew up for the most part, other than the elite guys at Lake Norman. I went to school at East Carolina, and you're over there in Scotland's Neck, North Carolina, not far from ECU at all. So it's good to have a Carolina boy going to the Classic above and beyond the elite guys. So tell me about the strategy on signing up for the Opens. Did you specifically sign up just because Bugs Island was on the schedule and it's a place that you frequented, quite a bit? Or was it finally, after a few years of maybe fishing around home, you're like, I want to test myself more on a national level or regional level with Bassmaster?
Well, I fished some Opens off and on. I fished the tour a few years ago. And it just, of course, Bugs being on the schedule was definitely like, all right, I think we got to be there for this one and see what happens. I fish a lot of time on Bugs, but I fished the Bassmaster last time when they were going to the James a lot, the Opens. I fished those Opens, and I fished a few different Open deals. But definitely when Bugs showed up, it was we got to try. We got to get there. to go fishing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the tournament itself. Obviously, over the course of 3 days, had, let's see, 48-13. One thing that really stuck out to me was kind of the story, I guess, of how you found the spot that you ended up kind of, making hay out of. Tell us a little bit about your practice, how that kind of transitioned into what you were able to produce during the tournament.
So, I started out the first couple of days of practice, and the water was, I think, 301 and a quarter or 301 and a half. Actually, it may have been below that. It was low for bugs, not super low, but it was lower. I think it was around that 301 level. But anyway, there were more fish on docks, floating docks, fry fish. They were on those stumps that everybody was live scoping. And we saw the weather, rain coming in, and it was kind of like, man, everything's going to change. And what we find in the next few days of practice is going to be just it's not going to be the deal. So actually, I think Sunday, it's been a while now, but I think Sunday I went and fished a tournament on Gaston, which is the lake below Carr. I had to fish that to qualify for keep some points going for another tournament. And then Monday, kind of the water came up exactly what I figured. It was going to rain and cloudy. And I knew they'd bite on that day, but it was just like everything's going to change. They're going to move so much. And anyway, so went out Monday and had a pretty good practice, found a couple, 3 stretches that were holding some fish when the water came up to 302 and a half, I think, and continued to rise, turned the upper end of the lake dirty, which I knew that would slow some catches up on the upper end of the lake. But it actually ended up being, once that stabilized, the upper end of the lake ended up being jamming by the final day. I mean, everybody that fished up there, I'm not sure exactly, but I know David was up there. David Williams, who finished second. He had a slamming day up there, and I think maybe Casey was there. I know there was one other guy fishing the bridge right at the ramp that jammed him the third day, and that's where we caught most of what we weighed in the third day. That's where we caught him, was up the lake.
This Bugs Island, the possibilities were endless on what it could be like. In North Carolina, Virginia region, first week of May, those fish could be heavy getting on the bed. They could be already done based on how hot it was. It's kind of it's an in between, but it's kind of good because you see a lot of baits pop up in the top lures gallery. A lot of different patterns can pop up. What was going on with that shad spawn? That's when we get around late April through May. That is something hot on everyone's mind. So tell us about the shad spawn. If it got better for people every day, or if it was just hit or miss based on, how early you guys got out there based on the sunlight. Because that's one way to get quick in a hurry in an open like that. Get a good boat draw and then catch a quick limit off shad spawn.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I fully intended this tournament to be just a slam out shad spawn. I mean, Carr Lake is a great lake for spinnerbait fishing and the shad spawn in general. It can really be unbelievable. But I tell you, that weather really checked it up. It was cold. We had all those cold nights, and the water temperature was still super, super. I want to say it was like 63, 62. It was just cold, and that cold air really checked that shad spawn up. And, when I launched out the first one of the tournament, that's what I went looking for, and came down a really good shad spawn. The wind was blowing on it, everything. You just go do it, and went down the whole bank, never saw any shad. And I just think that cold air checked it up. And most of the better fish, for sure, all the big ones, I think they were the last spawning fish coming up, because it seemed to be they were sitting on the buck brush. That's where they wanted to be, and that's typically where those females spawn. When it's a little high, they'll go to the gum tree on bugs, but it wasn't quite high enough for that. They really were. Every big one I caught was on buckbrush. And I never found, late the first day, I did find a group of fish where some shad had blown in there, and they were doing that deal a little bit. I caught 10 or 12 off of one place. My co-angler caught 2 or 3 off that, got his limit off that place. But in 3 days, that's the only truly like doing that shad spawn that I felt like that I fished. I just think the cold air really stopped that. I think you would have seen everybody catching 20 or 30 if that was really going on. And there was some shed doing it at the back of Nutbush. I think there was 2 or 3 guys in the top that were back there. They were catching fish that were around the shad, but the true shad spawn, I just don't. It was behind. We really saw more of that a few weeks after the Open was over, so it really made it a lot different than what I expected.
Pal, I gotta know. Day one, you caught the biggest bass of the event, 513. I gotta hear the story of that. That obviously was a big game changer, set you up for success the last 2 days. Tell us the story of that fish.
Man, that fish was, besides the heart attack that I had when I caught her, I went down the first shad spawn stretch that I checked and didn't get a bite, didn't see any shad. And I said, well, let me roll over in this corner. There's one corner close by with a few trees and a few bushes. I said, just keep on fishing through. And I threw to the left of the buck brush, and a male came out and swatted at my spinnerbait, didn't get it. And I threw right to the right, and she just come right out of the bush and just ate it and jumped around, went crazy. I'm the net thing is, I fish a lot of team tournaments, so I'm like wanting the net to be there because she's out there doing it. But anyway, we got her in and grabbed her and probably was pretty rough with her, but I knew right then that everything was, I felt like things were going to go the right way once that happened. I mean, the biggest fish of the tournament within 15 minutes of starting the day. And, I told myself before the tournament ever started, going into it, I said, the Bugs has been fishing tough on big fish, a lot of 2.5, 3 pounders, but that 4 or 5 pound class fish, I don't know. We've just had trouble finding them, all this year. I don't know exactly what's going on with that, but that class fish has been hard to get your hands on. And I said, if I catch 2 5-pounders over the event and, do the rest of what I expected, I'll have a shot to win. And it ended up being, I caught the 513 and caught a 5 the second day, caught a 4.5 the first day, and I caught another like 470 the second day. So I caught 4. They weren't quite 5-pounders, but they were in that class fish that is the difference maker on Bugs right now. I mean, 19 pounds was pretty strong ever since March went away. I mean, we saw some 20s in March, but it was 17, 18 was back to what was winning most of the tournament. So,
well, and that's one
Ronnie,
thing that, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in there. It's interesting you said that. Obviously, catching those better than average size fish. Eventually we'll get into your pattern exactly and kind of the baits and things of that nature. But was it an area, or was it a bait, or was it something specific you were doing to get those bigger than average bites, or you feel like you were just fortunate every day to get those right ones?
I think honestly I was just fortunate. I mean, I had some days before the cutoff. We fished some team tournaments up there, and I had catch 40 or 50 fish and not see a 4-pounder. Lots of weighed in 15, 16 pounds in those tournaments, and I didn't have a big one, didn't even have a 4-pounder. So I know, we went through a few years ago with Bugs that a 5-pounder was like gold. It's definitely been a little better than it was, but I just knew, seeing what the lake was producing, looking at the results during the 30-day off limit period, I could, the weights were down, 16, 17 were winning, but to look more than just the winning part was look at the checks. Last year or in the year before it was 15 to get a check, and this year it was backing down to the 12, 13s. So you're missing that, those kicker fish that were, everybody's catching a bunch of 2.5s, but they're missing that kicker. They're just not, a lot of them were not showing up this year. I don't know if it was the weather or, which the fish all over the country, I feel like, have been, with that cold air staying here to almost June. We were still catching them off the bed here till the end of June. I mean, there was still some going on bed. So, I mean, they were way behind for our area.
That's one thing that I was going to point out is the topic of, it's not difficult to get bites at Bugs Island, but what the weight expectations were. And in our group chat, we had different thoughts. And when you busted 19.5 pounds on day one, it's like, that's going to, boy, he can protect that 19.5 pounds and he'll be there as a factor on the final day. Were you a little shocked or what did you think the top 10 cut weight would be for it to be 13.5 pounds? Was that right around where you thought it'd be? And then obviously it's not ideal to have 12 on the final day for you, but you had done so much good work day 1 and day 2 that you didn't even need 10 pounds to win the event. Just to talk about those weight situations there with what it took to make the top 10 and then obviously protecting your 19-pound bag the rest of the week.
Well, I really felt like going in the tournament, looking at everything, 15 pounds a day, I thought was going to give a shot to win it. That's where I thought, bumping that 15 every day, you'd be right there at the end. Catching 19 right out of the gate, gave a heck of a buffer that I was not expecting. I would have been ecstatic with 15 pounds on the first day. But, then the second day went out, and I think it was the second biggest bag was 16 something of that day. So then we built that buffer, and it definitely changed the final day kind of. But I do feel like the cut weight overall was pretty close to what I was expecting by results. I think if it had been warmer and the shad spawn would have really been going on, where everybody was catching 30 fish a day, I don't think that Bass did not see what Bugs has the ability to show. I mean, even everybody catching the 2.5s and just catching a lot of fish. That bite was really off. And I mean, I was really slow fishing for what I'm used to. Normally it's bounced from, point to point, juice to juice, the sweet spots, and catch 2 or 3 and move on to the next spot. And it was more of a drop the trolling motor and fish, just keep the trolling motor down and hit everything in sight. And I think that's why you're picking up those lone spawners that are just kind of on something completely different, straight banks. But there weren't a lot of people on the main part of the lake because the bite is tougher out there. And I've always know that the biggest fish on Carr tend to stay out on that main drag, and it's always slower fishing. But we've always gone out there a couple hours at least every morning, try to get 1 5-pounder. That's the goal out there, to make the difference in the bag, where then you can run in the pockets and catch 2 to 3 pounders. Not to say obviously you catch 5-pounders in the pockets. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I just, and that's why I think a lot of people don't go out there, because it's much slower fishing. It's not easy, and that is definitely where local knowledge gave me some advantage, because I know, hundreds of days out there. I know the spots that in practice, I travel enough to know you fish a spot in practice and you don't get a bite, you don't go back. Well, if you'd have practiced this stuff on bugs and not got a bite, well, the water came up 3 foot and there they were. And, so I'm hitting a lot of stuff that you're not getting bit on, but I know the law of averages is 30% of the times over the time I've been there, I'll catch one there. And that's the local advantage that, that someone has anywhere they are fishing locally.
And Kyle, I want to jump in and piggyback off of that, because Bugs Island's a place that is kind of, has some Bassmaster lore and some nostalgia to it. Like some of the footage that anglers were watching to research probably was black and white, or it had some crazy music and narration on it, because it's just old school 90s, Bassmaster TNN type stuff. For you being someone who has local knowledge, how do you balance that? Oftentimes we see locals, when we had an elite event at Lay Lake and there's 8 elite guys that are locals there, half of them are going to struggle. That's just a guarantee. It's hard to avoid struggling. And so for you, was there some, not coaching in your mind, but on day 1 or day 2, you're like, no, I know I can go do that, but that's not the way to win. I got to stick with what I'm doing. Did you ever have those like, I got to zig when everyone else wants to zag?
Yeah, I knew that from the year and being there before the cutoff and fishing some tournaments and seeing what everybody was catching, I knew the most fish in the lake that were biting best at the first day especially were at the back of Nutbush. And I mean, I know 3 or 4 guys that made the top 10 were fishing that. And I went back there and caught some fish out of it. But the first day it was kind of like, man, do I run straight back there and catch 12 to 14 pounds real quick and just kind of roll with it? And we rolled out and the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour or whatever. It was crazy that first day. It was blowing like the wildfire, and it picked up more and more. And so I stopped on some of that stuff that I've caught bigger ones on. Obviously, the first stop caught a 513, and that just was like, I'm staying out here. I don't need but 3 bites, and somewhere in between, I'll fill in with limit fish that will make the difference. So I never ran back there to where the biggest group of fish on the lake was back there this year. To start with, that's where they've been. That's where you catch 30 to 40 earlier in the year. There was just a bunch of fish back there. And there's always, we went through some years, maybe 10 years ago, where the only place to catch them was in Nutbush because all the tournaments went out of Nutbush. And, now we've got some really big tournaments that have gone out of Clarksville. And Angler's Choice has a big team trail that goes out of there, and they bring back hundreds of fish. And over the last 10 years, the upper end of the lake has really come back around, which is much better than everybody, being stuck in Nutbush and you can't win without leaving Nutbush. But it's not true that way anymore. And actually, I ended up, so if I spent 24 hours fishing, I spent 20 of them in Nutbush and 4 of them up the lake, and I ended up weighing in. I think I figured it's 8 or 9 of the fish of the 15 come from up the lake. So over the course of the 3 days, I mean, the first day I caught a 3.5 when I was waiting for weigh-in at the end, right there above the ramp. The second day I caught a 4.5 on the way back up, and caught another almost 3-pounder right there where I started the final morning, which gave me the clue to that's why I started there the next morning, because I was headed in and I was done and stopped there and caught like 3 in the last 10 minutes. I said, let me go over here and do this. And so we started there the next morning, and that's where we ultimately caught everything we weighed in. I ran back down to Nutbush because there was 2 stretches that I'd found the last day of practice, and I never had not fished them yet. And I went back down and it felt like I needed one more 3-pounder to completely put it away. And I knew somebody was going to have to catch 20, and I knew there was only maybe 2 or 3 guys that, even those are the 2 guys that had to catch the 20. It wasn't anybody in the top 10 catch 20 to catch me. It was, it was a different deal. But all I can say is the Lord blessed me, made all the right decisions. He led me to where we ended up, man. That's all I can say.
One of the things, prior to the event that everybody was talking about is that we were going to get kind of an old school style tournament. Obviously, like Ronnie mentioned, it being a lake that, Bassmaster hadn't been to in a long time, just the style of fishing. And it seemed like your bait choices kind of reflected that. Tell us a little bit about your baits, that prevailed for you.
Well, I caught everything on a Glimmer Blue spinnerbait on the Nutbush end of the lake. And I caught everything on the upper end of the lake with a chartreuse and white big bladed thumping spinnerbait, just because it was so dirty up there. I think that's why a lot of guys weren't fishing up there. I mean, I wasn't fishing up there, but when I stopped in the dirt and it's muddy as a pig pen and you catch 3 in 10 minutes, it's like, maybe something's up with this. And, the day before I caught like 10 or 12 up there, but I was in a creek where the water was cleaner. But I mean, Bugs is definitely it's dominated by power fishing over the, it's still one of the lakes that's dominated by power fishing. The bluebacks they don't like to go deep very much. I mean, obviously they get 1 out deep, but it's only 1 or 2 guys that find them out there. There's still so many fish that stay shallow all the time. It's a pattern fishing lake. And the water coming up definitely makes it like, it's just like go fishing. I mean, the old school way before and I know a couple of the guys in the top were fishing Panoptics and fishing the stumps. And, I've really just trying to get more into that and learn it a little bit better, because there's definitely something to it. But it's the weather conditions worked out perfectly for it to be a old school run the bank, run and gun type tournament. I'm thinking that I really am. I'm hoping that more people keep going out there Panoptics fishing so I can have the bank to myself. But
Hey, it's
wait
always
for
a
the
good
days
day.
where it turns around.
That's what we've always said on the Bassmaster podcast. We're two guys. We don't have live scope on our boats, but we see the effectiveness of it. We understand it. We don't hate it. But we said, hey, the pressured fish, which were bank fish, are probably going to be the unpressured fish soon. So I'm excited about that. But it's always a good day when you can chunk around a lunker lure and flip a brush hog around. But that leads us to a couple key baits, put some key fish in the boat for you that won you a big time tournament. And now you get to go fish in the biggest tournament of them all, the Bassmaster Classic next year at Grand Lake. Have you thought about that yet? Have you fished Grand Lake before? Obviously excited to fish the Classic. You can't win it if you're not there. And are you a guy who has been to Classics before, especially when they've been in North Carolina back in the past or at Hartwell, things like that? Or have you reserved the right to attend one until you can compete in one?
Well, I will say I've never been to a Classic, but I was not the boy Duckett who said I would never go to a Classic till I qualified because I figured I'd never go to one, period. But it's just never worked out for me to go. I've looked at a couple times, buddies said, let's go to the Hartwell when it was at Hartwell, or just timing it just has never worked out. It's never been something like I'm not going unless I'm qualified because this is a lifelong dream. I never, we all dream of going there, but I never been like I expect to be there. I mean, it's very hard to get there in a lot of different directions. I did, I was second in the Bass Nationals. I guess it was 8 or 9 years ago to Coble, and he got to go to the Classic. So I mean, that was the closest I'd ever come to doing it. So it's a dream come true. It's a blessing. But yeah, I've already spent probably, I hate to say it, I probably already watched like 20 hours of live on Grand, watching, kind of seeing what everybody's doing. So yeah, we've already started doing some research. I'm planning on in a couple of weeks. I run a hunting business, so we're trying to get all the hunting stuff straight because we start hunting like mid-September. So I was like, as soon as I get back from Watts Bar, I'm full bore hunting for 4 months. So trying to get a couple of weeks, in a couple of weeks, head out to Grand and get a few days looking around, but so just to kind of get an idea. So I'm not getting there the 3 days of practice and be like, okay, I caught a fish here. Where is this? And spend half of it riding around. So, which, look, let's face it, live has made things change dramatically because you can watch guys all day and it's not the 1 hour TV show like, oh yeah, he jammed them on this one spot. You can see everything and where everybody's fishing, and sometimes for me, I kind of want to see the guy that's not necessarily getting the limelight, but he's off to the, where's he at? He's over here in this place that's not so good, but the not so good place suddenly becomes a good place when there's not 20 boats there. So
Joey Cifuentes.
but yeah, I hope to head out there in a couple of weeks and take a look for 4 or 5 days and spend graphing time and just see the lake. I've never seen it, so go get a feel for it.
Well, Carolinian probably won't hate it too bad. In all honesty, I asked Jason Christie this a long time ago. I said, why are you, as an Oklahoma guy, so good at a place like Lake Hartwell and things like that? And he said, Hartwell, honestly, kind of fishes like Grand and some of these other lakes, just certain times of the year, the way the fish position and the way they relate, obviously, fishing around cable docks, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how now a Carolinian can translate to Oklahoma, see if it works out for you. But as long as you don't go pre-practice Grand September 14th through the 16th, you'll be good to go because you got to be at Watts Bar, through hell or high water. You got to be there to make the Classic. So we look forward to seeing you there. Maybe we'll have you on Bassmaster Live for the final day at Watts Bar. But Powell, congratulations once again. Like you said, it's not very often that you get to go to the Classic. Some great anglers will never be there. The only way Kyle and I could ever go to a Classic is if we got a job with B.A.S.S. So we just said, we'll guarantee it. We'll work the Classic and we'll see you there. So Powell, congratulations. And thanks for being on the podcast today, man.
Yeah, man, guys, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it and we'll look forward to seeing y'all.
The champion of the third stop of the Bassmaster Opens season, Powell Kemp, and he is going to the Bassmaster Classic, Kyle, Jessie. It's always cool to see the college, the nation, the Opens. so many walks of life, so many backgrounds, guys who have day jobs that fish when they can, they make time for the schedules, and then boom, all of a sudden now they're going to be docked up in Wolf Creek along with the best of the best, the guys that he's watching on live throughout the elite season. He now gets the opportunity to steal a couple dollars from their account and put them into his.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine for guys like Powell and guys that have never fished the classic, like, our college anglers that make it, all the guys you just mentioned, like, I just imagine that whole week is just like, it's probably a blur because it's just such a crazy week. And then two, it's got to be just so rewarding, obviously fishing the biggest bass tournament in all of bass fishing. So, I think that his win there was so impressive. And this is nothing against Powell whatsoever, but like you and I have this thing where basically day one of each open, whoever leads it with a big bag like that, we almost always tend to be, you and I will text each other and be like, how bad does this guy fall flat on his face tomorrow? Because it happens every open. Like somebody always will, and not always, there's obviously anomalies, but somebody will always catch him really good day one, and then day two turn around and not catch anything. And Powell just kept the foot on the gas and really had an amazing tournament there, and happy for him and really, really glad that we got to catch up with him today and hear more about it.
Yeah, and we got to have the drama on the final day. You have a big lead, there's no drama, and then all of a sudden you're looking at Bass Track throughout the day, and you're like, David Williams and Casey Scanlon are coming. They are charging. If they catch one more fish and have a 19-pound bag like he had, it could be ounces at the weigh-in. But congratulations to Powell Kemp. That's what we love about the Bassmaster Opens. I always appreciate the walks of life, the regions of the country. And up next, our fourth champion of the Open season, Adam Rasmussen. He is another one of them, different region of the country. Wisconsin, spends his time doing other things than bass fishing when he's not on the Bassmaster Opens as well. And we get to have him on the podcast because he was our Wheeler Lake champion just a few weeks later. I think it was like maybe 10 days, maybe 12 days after the Bugs Island event. They were back at it at Lake Wheeler in Alabama. So he is our fourth champion, and he's our next guest on the Inside Bassmaster podcast. And Kyle, we mentioned it, the fourth stop of the Bassmaster Open season for 2023 took us to Wheeler Lake in Alabama. We were really excited for the first couple events of the season based on where we were going and the time of the year we were going there. Obviously, you follow Alabama, then you have Toledo Bend, you go to Bugs Island, a new venue. Recently, it's got one that's nostalgic for reasons, and it was good talking to Powell about his victory. And now we come to Wheeler, one of the lakes on the Tennessee River that really doesn't get a lot of love compared to the other ones, but Wheeler has its times and has its moments, and boy, did it show out for the most part for the fourth stop when Adam Rasmussen took the title. Adam, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Like we mentioned it, Kyle, 54 pounds and change for 3 days. If you're doing the math on that, that's better than 15 pounds a day, almost not quite 20 pounds a day, right there in that 17, 18 pound range. Fantastic average, but really, Adam, you had a huge day, a below average day, and then another huge day. Tell us about how that week progressed for you, obviously mid-May on the Tennessee River.
So to start out, that one I had limited practice on. I fished a smallmouth tournament here at home before I headed down there, so I had 2 days. And practice really didn't go that well. But like I kind of had an idea where they were going to go. So I spent a lot of time looking for that stuff, and everything actually worked out. Nothing was the same 3 days in a row. Every day I had to do something a little bit different, and timing was weird. But the first day, to start out, I started on a shad spawn. I found some fish the final day of practice in the morning. Started there just because that was really on the Decatur Flats. There were so many boats on the shell bars on there. It was just the one spot I could slide into, and I was kind of by myself. And I caught a 3.5 pounder, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, that's the biggest one I've caught all week. And I caught a couple other 2.5 pounders. That was it, kind of fizzled out. So then I ran up river and I fished a bunch of grass. That actually I felt like that was my best chance, and they all turned into midgets. They all shrunk. So I think I left there. I had like 11 pounds at noon, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go run back down and fish some offshore stuff. And I had one little sweet spot that I could see on my 360, and I can't believe like nobody else really fished it. It was like the most obvious ledge on, outside of the Decatur Flats. So I pulled up there, and they're pulling a little bit of water, and I threw a swinging rugby head up there, and I cracked a 6.3 on my first cast, and I'm like, okay, this is the deal. And then it was my next 6 or 7 casts. I had a bite on every cast, caught one on every cast, was calling. I looked at my scale. I was up around 19 pounds. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to leave it because I really don't have that much stuff for the week. So we left them biting. I had a couple that weren't doing real good. So we ran back to the landing, grabbed some ice. Fish came back. They were fine. Just ended up calling it quits early. And I think I was in 7th on day 1. So extremely happy with how the day went. Second day, we had a little different weather. It was windy. The water was kind of getting muddy around where I caught them on day 1. I started on a shad spawn. There was no shad spawn going on. It kind of got a little cooler that night. So I left that. I fished like 4 ledge spots that I had. I caught like a 3.8, and that was the only fish I caught. I'm like, man, it's like 9:30 in the morning. Like, I gotta put some fish in the boat. So I ran all the way down to the bottom end of the lake to go fish some grass down there. Caught one little rat, and it was kind of the same deal as the first day. It was like 11:30. I ran back up the lake. I'm like, I'm gonna go hit those 4 ledges again, and then I'm going to go up to the grass, upriver, salvage what I can, hopefully get a check and some points. And I pulled up on that spot. I caught him on the first day, and I think I caught like 8 in a row. And my 9th cast, I looked over the side, and the water wasn't moving anymore, and it was over. And I think I weighed 14 and a half, somewhere in there.
And still 7th going in the final day.
I would. Yeah, I stayed in 7th. I didn't even think I would have stayed in the top 10. So then it was pretty cool. Like, I was jacked up just to make a top 10. I've been trying really hard at this, and made a top 10. Everybody's like, it's the coolest experience ever. Just enjoy the day. And final day took off, and it's amazing. Like, there's 9 other boats. That's it. So you get to fish whatever you want. So I'm running down river, and I had a spot that there were a bunch of good ones on during practice, and there's nobody there, and it's about a 50-yard stretch of shell bar, and the shad were spawning up there. I caught a couple 2.5s right away. I caught a 4, and then I pretty much committed myself to that spot and grounded out until it ended. And I think what was it, 8:09? I caught a 5 3/4-ish, and it was done after that. Like, I put that one in the live well. I gave my marshal a fist bump. I'm like, I think I'm going to the Bassmaster Classic. I'm pretty sure I just won. And then the weird thing was, though, like, I'm catching them like nice ones, like high 3s, mid 4s, and rifling through a lot of fish. And I'm like, man, there's no camera boats. Like, something strange is going on here. Like, somebody else is catching them better. So then I got that going through my mind later in the day, and like, I'm trying to catch one more big one, and it just never did. They didn't pull any water, so like the ledge stuff I had, that wasn't working, and so it all went down really quick the final day, but we got enough to get it done.
Well, for what it's worth, I can explain the lack of camera boat being on you. What happened?
Yeah, confess your sins, Kyle.
We went and covered Sam that morning, of course, And as Adam knows, it started downpouring about mid-morning, and we had made it pretty far up. And Adam knows this because we ended up covering him for the last half of the day. And I can confirm he did not catch any big ones later in the day. We sat with him all day, and he'd just turn around periodically and be like, dude, you missed it. You missed it. But anyways, we made it way far. Well, I say way far up, further than I'd been at least. Obviously, it started storming. We had a hell of a time trying to get back down to where you were, and then we finally made it. And like you described, it was over with. But no, that was really an incredible final day. And I can remember just sitting there thinking, this would be one of those tournaments where I really, really wish we had live cameras in the boat, because it seemed like everybody was just going through like flurries. Like Polinick like ended up going through one later in the day. Your flurry happened so fast. It seemed like, before I even looked at Bass Track at all in the morning, like it had already happened. But one thing I did want to ask you about, you mentioned getting out there for practice. At least from my perspective, like going out there for the first day of the tournament, it was like shocking how many boats were fishing on like one area. When you saw that in practice, like what was your mindset? Like, did you just like assume at that point there was no way you weren't going to fish around boats, or did you say, look, I'm going to try to find the most obscure thing possible to try to get away from the boats?
I knew it was going to go one way or the other. Either you had to find some little subtle areas and stay by yourself, or just get in the crowd and deal with it. And fishing in a crowd doesn't really bother me. That's kind of how we fish up here in Sturgeon Bay. Every tournament you fish in, you're always in a group of boats. So it doesn't bother me, but when I'm on a lake that I've never been to, like I'd rather have something to myself. So I had a couple just little hard spots. I don't even know if they were really shell beds. Just harder spots in the sand on the flats. And those shad were spawning on those too. So that's kind of where I started all my mornings until that final day. And then I got to go to the most obvious, as one of the most obvious ones. And I kind of had it all to myself. So
tell us about that. You said that final day you went down, you're able to fish a lot of places that, nobody else is fishing. You got a lot of more water. You said you went and fished another spot that you had fished or checked out in practice. Once you caught those fish, you didn't leave that area at all. So you didn't even go upriver. I know you said they didn't run water. Is that reason you never hit that ledge spot where they were biting every cast and where you had caught the big one on day one? Like, did you even think about wanting to go up there? Or once you had over 21 pounds, you're like, I probably got it done and there's no point with them not running water? Or did that ever occur to you in your mind?
Oh no, that ledge spot was right across the channel from where I caught him in the morning. So,
okay.
Kyle saw it. I think I ran back there like 6 or 7 times just to check it and see if they're pulling water, and they never were. And so then I stayed in that whole section of the lake and just expanded on everything, and covered some more water and tried to figure out what they were doing, and caught some shorts and a lot of really big drum. That was pretty much the excitement for the day.
Another thing I wanted to bring up, I was going to kind of, segue this into the last question, but, one thing that seemed like it was so, so important, as it always is with shad spawn tournaments, early bite tournaments, was boat number. It seemed like the first day, whoever caught them, you could, just assume one of two things. They caught them early, and chances were they weren't going to catch them the next day. What were your boat numbers, and did that have a big effect on your game plan days 1 and 2?
Day 1, I was boat 21.
Ooh.
And so I actually had a good boat number, but reaction was just to go to where I found them the day before and kind of bypass some better looking stuff. Whether it was the right move or not wrong move, I don't know. But I kind of had a stretch to myself, and I fished that. And then second day I was boat, 21 from 225. So
206.
I had a late boat number, and then obviously I had nothing to really start on for a shad spawn. I wheeled into one area. It just didn't feel right that morning either. Like, it was a little cooler, and the wind was blowing. Nothing really felt right. So I just went to some deeper ledges right away and got on that deal, and that wasn't happening. I only caught the one, and then I ran downriver fished all that grass, and then came back up and kind of I had to calm myself down and just, you know, you got to be patient and wait for them to show up and start feeding, and they did. And then, I mean, every day it all happened within like an hour. It was crazy. Every day I caught them in a different place, and I caught them within an hour to an hour and a half time frame, if that. I think day 2 was about 20 minutes.
And I mean, you growing up watching Bassmaster Elite Series events on the Tennessee River in the heyday, you know that it's those windows of time when it happens, it can happen better than you've ever had in your life, but you might not be on the right spot when it's happening. And so I guess rotating spots was key, but you had a couple of those things. So explain that area on that you saw on 360, you know, that where you caught the big one day 1, some of those different things. The most obvious place you said, did it have any other attributes other than hard spot and, you know, a ledge hard spot with the current rolling?
That was really it, but it led up onto a giant flat. It was actually an underwater island, you could call it. That had like is either shell or really hard rock. It had like a spine going down it. And throughout practice, I caught a few fish up on top of that. But like this seemed to be like the spot that they first came to out of the channel. It topped off at about 9 feet, and I could see it plain as day on my 360. I was actually just fishing the whole point one day, and I could see it, and I could see a bunch of them sitting on it, and spot locked, and I made 3 casts, and I had 3 bites, and, you know, marked it, and I knew that was going to be a key spot when the current turned on.
What's the depth change as well? What's from the channel to that step up to then the point? Like, what was the dramatic change or not?
Kind of came up from 25 to 11. It was flat for a little bit, and then it come up to 9 was the high spot on it where those fish sat, and then it dropped back down to 11, 12, and then it would come up onto that hard spot on that island. So it was just kind of like the perfect spot where they could funnel up, they could sit on that and feed. Or, you know, I would imagine a lot of fish too were coming from the top of that giant flat and funneling off of it throughout the day as well. But the whole key was if there wasn't current, you were not getting a bite. You could sit and look at them, throw whatever you want at them, they would not eat. And as soon as that water would move just a little bit, it wasn't like they're drastically pulling current that week. It would start moving just a little bit. You could notice it when you're sitting on spot lock. You could see the bubbles rolling by your boat. Then they would start eating, and as soon as that stopped, it was over.
Now, for those that may have forgotten or not seen the top lures gallery, tell us how you caught them, what you caught them on. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the spots, the kind of areas you were throwing, or you were fishing. Tell us a little bit about the baits that you were throwing and how you were catching them.
Yeah, so I on that offshore deal, I caught a lot of my fish on a VMC swinging rugby jig with the new Crush City cleanup craw on it, and just slowly reeling it and letting it bang into the rocks and the shell and hard bottom. That's what I caught. My first cast with that was a 6.3. I actually didn't tie it on until the morning of the tournament. I don't know why. Like, wow. I didn't pre-fish with it. And I was sitting there before takeoff, and I'm like, man, I need to tie on a rugby jig, and I want to fish that on some of that deeper stuff. And you know, I've caught a lot of fish on it on the rivers. I've never fished the Tennessee River in the summertime, but like up here at La Crosse, Mississippi River, I catch a lot of fish on that jig, and it just kind of spaced it out during practice and thought of it the morning of and tied it on, and that was a huge player in the offshore stuff. And then in the mornings on the shad spawn, you know, I caught them all on a bladed jig, and this is that new Crush City freeloader trailer, which is just a flat, straight-tailed trailer. I caught all my fish on the shad spawn on that, and actually snagged some shad on the final day on it, and they were identical in size, you know, and the body of it. So that was the key thing to get it done in the morning, especially the final day. And you can see like all the paint's knocked off of it from rolling across that shell bar.
As a chatterbait
So
lover, I'm excited to see that as well. But can you, for people in Wisconsin and Minnesota, I noticed this when we covered the college series, the Swanson brothers from Bemidji State, they were in the top 10 and won championship off of a shad spawn and like schooling type fish. And they were like, yeah, we're learning how to do it this week. And I was like, wait, what? And that was when I discovered that you guys don't really have shad spawns up north. Like we do down south. So for one, what was that like when you started fishing the opens nationally in 2021 and you came down? You know about it, you hear about it, you see the elites doing it. You probably have fished national tournaments as well, just around, but learning the shad spawn and then how to take and adapt how you guys fish up north to maybe towards it a little different, because we've got our 3 or 4 standard baits we throw, but you guys probably have twists on things as you picked it up and learned it, equated it to things you recognize at home.
Yeah, I mean, I just like to fish something that I can fish fast and cover water. Like when they're on a shad spawn, and I've only seen it maybe 3 or 4 times, like 3 or 4 weeks that I've been down south. Like when they're on that, it is crazy. Like you look around the boat and there are giant ones blowing up on shad, and you would think they'd eat just about anything you throw in the water, and no, like they're super picky, and I don't understand why. But sometimes it can actually be frustrating. Like you see it, you can watch them, and you'll watch. Oh, there's like a 5-pounder just came up and ate shad right there, and like you're not catching those big ones. Um, so I've learned like you really do have to, like, I guess call it match the hatch. You got to make your stuff look like the forage they're eating, and cast it. And it, like one thing I did, like I was getting them to react, um, and that's why like I like a bladed jig like that, because I can burn it really fast. And I think all that was happening is I'm burning this jig through those balls of shad, and then I would kill it, and they would just eat the easy meal. Like this comes falling out of a ball of bait, and they're going to eat it. It's just going to trigger them. So that's kind of, I learned a lot about it on 3 days of fishing on Wheeler. Let's put it that way.
That's what's crazy, because you're just a few years older than Kyle and I, and obviously we've got, I've got 30 years of tangible shad spawn experience, just a month or two every year that I get to fish. And I take it for granted that you guys have been fishing at a high level for a while up north, and you just have never been opened up to that. It's kind of crazy. Just like we don't fish for fish that eat gobies, or we don't necessarily do certain things you guys do. So that is pretty wild and crazy. And I will say, you talked about breaking through for your first top 10 on the opens. You've had your two best finishes in the opens over the 3 or 4 years that you fished them this year. I think Toledo Bend was the 25th. That was your highest at a certain point. And then now you'll never break your highest finish as a first. You can't get much better than that. So congrats on the good run. But I do know that it is a tight race this year in the Opens EQ points race. It is absolutely crazy how good they're catching them.
Yeah, I got my work cut out for me in these last 3. Obviously, the Classic is a bonus, but like my real goal is to make the Elite Series and make a career out of this. So I shouldn't say make a career out of it. I've been doing this since I was 18, as far as fishing for a living and guiding and all that stuff. But yeah, my ultimate goal is to make the Elite Series, and I want to crack at it. But I've only been down south for 2 years, so like I'm learning a lot. I'm happy with how I'm doing this year. I'm sitting okay in points. I just gotta get a little bit lucky and get my stuff together for these last 3 events. There's still a chance. But yeah,
100 points
guys
out.
Are catching up.
I think 100 points out is still very doable in a 200 boat field with 3 events left. You go and get 3 guaranteed checks, but you go and get a top 10, or you go get 2 top 15s. You'll make it interesting going to Florida for sure. And Florida at that time of the year could be a heavyweight shootout where, the wrong person catches 15 a day instead of 17 a day, and they're 80 spots lower than they should be. So you want to at least have that shot, like you said, after these next 2 going into the final one. So 100 points out, I think, is still very, very doable if you go on a stretch for sure.
For sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Adam, I do want to take a rewind. I want you to put yourself back on the final day of that tournament there at weigh-in, because one of the things that stood out to me the most about that tournament being there was that final weigh-in was wild. Like, nobody really knew who was going to win. Like, it became like it went from all day like Adam's going to win this going away to like by the time the end of the day rolled around, it was like, I don't know what Polnick has. I don't know what Austin has. I don't know who has what. I don't know what Sam has. And it seemed like, you got to weigh in, pretty early, being in seventh going into the final day. And you sat there, and it's like each guy that passed, it was like, I just want to know what that feeling was like. Because I remember watching it, like my heart was beating out of my chest. I can only imagine what it was like for you in those moments.
Oh man, that was the craziest one I've ever won. Like, I didn't look at Bass Track when I got in. Once we check in and everything, we can look at it. But my dad was standing on the dock, and he's like, Polnick just caught a couple of big ones right before weigh-in, and I'm like, oh man, like,
Appreciate
I knew
that.
I needed one more good one today. Like, so we're sitting in weigh-in line, and I can hear, Brandon and a couple other guys behind me, and they're talking, and nobody knows me, so I'm just hanging out, waiting to weigh my fish. And Brandon's like, I got 20 exactly. I weighed them, and I'm like doing all the math in my head. I'm like, all right, well, I think I won, but you never know until it's actually over. So once he got across the stage, I felt a little bit better about it. But then there's a few more hammers coming across, and I think I looked at Hank, and I'm like, come on, let's just get this over with. Like, I don't want to sit here and ponder on it. But then it was like they said I won, and it didn't seem real. I guess it took a little bit for that to sink in. So very cool experience.
Well, I got to meet you outside of a restaurant at Eufaula, Alabama. First event of the season. We're eating some food. You guys roll by the table. Jamie Bruce, who is Gussie 2.0, sounds the same, looks the same. He's just got darker hair, just as nice. And then you had Brad with you, and you were the one guy I didn't necessarily know, and so it's very cool to see how it's progressed. Jamie's in the race, obviously for qualifying. You are as well, but now you're going to the Classic. So did any of your northern boys, I can't say Canadians because you're not Canadian, but close to that border, did any of the boys hang around for the final day weigh-in to root you on? And also, what's it been like to travel together with some guys for all 9 with all the same goals and efforts, and to have taste of success from everybody?
Yeah. Brad Leitner stayed back and watched. Jamie had to get to work, so I think he was gone by the time I weighed in on day 2. But it was cool. Brad was there. My dad was there. My dad actually drove me down so I could get some sleep on the way down, because I left right from a tournament here. So it was very cool to have a couple of people there to cheer me on, egg me on. And the whole traveling thing, like, it's good with the guys that we have. Actually, that one, the Aussie,
Tommy
won the Coing. He was staying with us as well, so we had 2 wins out of the same house. But
a bunch of
cool, like,
Canadians and Australians and Northerners staying in Decatur, Alabama. Right? I can only imagine the heckling the neighbors are like, these guys in the Airbnb sound funny. Like, they just sound
right. Yeah, so we had it was a good week for the house, and it's cool staying with some other guys. Last year I did the camping deal. I bought a pickup camper, and there's a few guys that camp as well, and you get to know some guys. But it's nice staying with some buddies, and you can bounce ideas off of each other, and somebody thinks you're doing something stupid, they're gonna say it and tell it to you. And it's that aspect of it's cool. But yeah, some good friends that I got to fish with this year, and I've met a lot more people in the last couple of years of doing this. It's just cool, the people that you meet, the places that we get to go, and all that. And I'll say thanks to my wife too for putting up with me doing this, because like I don't just fish tournaments. I'm a full-time guide. I've been guiding since I was 18 years old. So like that's my primary income. This is I want to
Auxiliary.
say more of a hobby. Yeah,
Yeah.
like this is my time to get away and go fish by myself and give myself that opportunity to do something different, and maybe another road opens up down the road here, but that's why I'm doing these. So I'm gone guiding 7 days a week. I run a salmon charter service, a salmon boat, walleye and bass guiding. I'm gone all the time when I am home and hardly see her, and then I leave for 9 weeks to do these, and I fish 6 or 7 other tournaments. But it's cool that she's behind me too. I wish her and the kids would have came down, but we had the conversation the night before I won. She's like, well, should I book a plane ticket? We can be there by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, man, I got to catch like 21 or 22 pounds to have a chance at winning this thing. I'm like,
I'm
could
311
it
back.
happen? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I think it's going to happen? Let's just be real. Probably not. But once in a while, the stars align and everything works out. So.
And now Adam Rasmussen's going to the Bassmaster Classic. As long as you show up at the Harris Chain, if you miss any open this year, don't miss the last one of the season at the Harris Chain. That'll confirm your classic spot for Grand Lake next year. With that being said, what's it mean to you as a tournament angler to make the Bassmaster Classic? And what is your earliest classic memory that either attending one in person or watching them online that you're like, I got to do that one day?
Man, I can't really tell you the exact age, but I knew I was probably in my lower teens, maybe 11, 12 years old even, kind of when I started getting a little bit of an itch to bass fish. I remember watching the Bassmaster Classic, and I'm like, man, that would be really cool to make it to that point. And I've kind of worked my whole life to get to the point where I can fish stuff to give me that opportunity. And now that I've made it, it's I'll be honest, it hasn't even sunk in yet. I haven't thought about it, but it's going to be pretty dang cool to go to Grand Lake. I was there in 2021. I like the lake. I think it's going to be really fun in the springtime there. No, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to cherish it, because who knows when your next one might be, if there is a next one. I don't know, but I'm going to enjoy it. I've always said, like, people are like, dude, why don't you go and watch it, attend it? I'm like, no, I don't want to. I'm not going to the Classic until I fish it. So it's pretty cool that now I'm going to it.
That's perfect.
You spoiled it.
Yeah.
You went that whole time. I was going to bring that up, because that was one of the things that really stood out to me that final day weigh-in, was that you told some of your friends that you weren't going to go to one until you made it, and then finally you're going and you're fishing.
Yeah, Brad Leitner that I travel with, he's like, he went to the Classic this last spring for the first time ever to attend it, and actually Jamie went down there to cheer on Gussie and watch him win. I almost went there. We were somewhere down in Florida. We're on a family vacation, spring break with the kids, and I wanted to stop there on the way home, and lodging was outrageous what there was left, and I kind of just said, screw it, move on, whatever. Maybe next year I'll go. And Brad calls and he's like, dude, this is the coolest thing ever. You got to come to the Classic next year. I'm like, I'll come there. Like, I'm going to fish it next year. And it all worked out. So it's really weird. I was talking to Jamie about it. He has the Get the Net podcast up in Canada, and I was on it in January, and we're just talking about the Opens and what we think is going to happen. And he's like, well, which one do you think, if you are going to win one, which one would you pick? Obviously I said the St. Lawrence, and I kind of got demolished there a few weeks ago, but because that's what I do is Great Lakes smallmouth fish, put the odds in your favor. And he's like, no, you can't pick that one. So I picked Wheeler Lake just because it was down the road from Gunnersville. Gunnersville is probably still my favorite lake in the country to fish. I go there. I've been there 3 or 4 times in the springtime, late February, March, and I've caught one over 8 pounds every time I've been there. I've caught some giants there. It's a super cool lake. You get to throw a bladed jig a lot there.
Yeah.
So I kind of picked that just because it's a Tennessee River thing, and I like fishing off the bank, and just kind of felt that was gonna be my chance. And then lo and behold, that's how it all worked out too. It's crazy.
That's crazy. It's crazy. And also, I'll say this, and Kyle can back me up on it. Seth Feider, Bob Downey, there's a lot of those Midwest guys, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that do well on the Tennessee River. They do well in Gunnersvilles and the Pickwicks and the Wheelers, and there's really nothing like it other than maybe the grass fishing that you guys have up north, or maybe hard spots, some structure fishing at times in the summer or whatever. But yeah, definitely very cool to see it play out that way. To see more and more people from the Midwest. I asked Seth Feider this, the other day about why we've seen an explosion the last decade. Does he feel like his success has helped lead to more people trying it? Obviously, Austin Felix has had success. Josh Douglas has been a veteran for a long time in the Opens. And all of a sudden, we start seeing a whole wave of these guys, Jay Shakuritz's now, that they're all of a sudden that's an area of the country that it's almost as good as Alabama in terms of producing pros. So welcome to the club. When it comes to the Classic next year, you'll be lining up beside of them, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. I don't know. I think a lot of it's from, I know all those guys. I think we've just watched them all and watched where they've got in the last several years. And I think a lot of other guys in the Midwest have finally said, like, this hard, but it's not that hard. Like, it's a feasible task. And just think a lot more of us are trying it now, and we're succeeding. And it's it's definitely cool to go to a different part of the country and figure a bite out and catch them. It's different, but it's not that much different. Like, we have a lot of different things in the Midwest. If you want to go practice on a grass lake, there's plenty of lakes with grass you can go fish, and you can adapt that stuff to a grass lake down south. I grew up walleye fishing and fished a lot of walleye tournaments. Walleyes aren't very hard to catch. It's finding them that's the hard part, and they're always eating. They're always chasing bait. They're always eating. So, like, I've learned a lot about bait fish movements and stuff like that through walleye fishing, which I think helps with southern bass fishing, because it's kind of the same deal. Like, you find the food, you find the fish. It's not that hard. Especially like on the Tennessee River lakes, it's all shad. You find the shad, you find the bass.
Yeah, where the shad's at, where they could possibly go, and the bass will follow. Awesome. Well,
exactly.
Hey, I know I've had specific years in my life that I could highlight as being like Ronnie's year. Like, this was a great year of my life. Everything worked out. You go and you're doing well in the points. You win an Open to go to the Bassmaster Classic. You just had a child just a week or two ago, and a few weeks ago from when this podcast will air. So this is Adam Rasmussen's year. Congratulations. If that's the case, then the next 3 Opens are going to be perfect, right there for the taking for you. So keep the year going.
Awesome, guys. I hope we get an opportunity to chat again this year. If not, I will see you next March.
Guaranteed. And if, hey, worst case scenario, if you don't qualify for the elites this year, just go win the Bassmaster Classic, right, Kyle? And since he's not qualified for the elites, if you win the Classic and you're non-elite, you get your ticket to the Elite Series. So just do it that way. If just one fell swoop.
Perfect. A few guys told me to go to the Classic, win it, and just retire, but I think I'll move on through the elite.
that bass, you got at least, if you win the Classic, you got to at least like be the defending champ, and then maybe go away. But if you're like Hank Cherry and these guys, you'll just win 2 in a row or something. You'll just never stop fishing. You'll just have to keep doing it.
Right.
Awesome.
It's an addicting sport.
It is. Well, hey, congratulations. Congrats on representing the Midwest well. And we'll see you hopefully on Bassmaster Live for the last 3 opens of the year for the final day in the top 10. You think top 10s are cool? Just wait till there's a top 10 with the camera in the boat. Hopefully you get to experience that this year as well.
Heck yeah. Thank you, guys.
Adam Rasmussen, Bassmaster Open champion at Wheeler Lake. We appreciate him. Join us on the podcast, Kyle. What a cool perspective to see in this episode. At least you get a guy close to home win at Bugs Island with Powell Kemp, and then a guy pretty far from home had a chauffeur drive him all the way down there just so he could sleep some, missed some practice, never been there, ends up winning. Pretty cool.
Yeah, no question. A really great episode, getting to catch up with both those guys, and like I said, being there at the tournament for Wheeler. I mean, I can say, firsthand, you earned it, because it was crazy. The flips and flops and, and the leaderboards and, obviously having good boat numbers, bad boat numbers. There was a lot going on, and figuring out how to catch those fish consistently enough to make the final day really was tough enough. But then to close the door on the final day was really, really impressive performance by Adam there, and absolutely a great guest on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the top 10, I'm just going to read off a couple of the guys. If you don't know the top 10, we're going to teach you about them. Adam, obviously, is our guest today on the podcast. Brandon Polinick finished in 2nd place. Austin Cranford, he's made top 10s before, like at Sam Rayburn in the fall of 2022, I believe. Sam George, a local product there. He was the one who previewed the episode. He got 4th place in the tournament. He was the day 2 leader going to the final day. JT Russell, Montevallo Hammer, one of the I guess from this generation of Montevallo anglers. And then you go back to the Clint Davis time, he's somewhere in the middle. He was the one who really bridged the gap during my era and your era of college fishing there. Clark Winlet, Elite Series pro. Trey McKinney, one of the prodigies of the Opens, youngster that's just phenomenal. Then you had guys like Alan Johnson and Harry Payton. I believe they're both pretty local to that region. And then you have Justin Kimmel, one of the EQ anglers, and one of the guys that's big with the Bass University over the last few years. So just a phenomenal top 10. Wheeler can have some great changes daily, and I'm talking about great in terms of like huge swings. Go from 19 to catching 14 to catching 21. You can think that you're hot stuff. Nothing works the next day like it did day 1, and you have to adjust once again, and then you get the mojo right back. So it's pretty cool to be in contention. But the Midwest, man, they're churning them out. Fantastic to see that as well. Jamie Bruce, we mentioned him on the episode. He's a Canadian from Gussie's territory that is right there in the thick of qualifying in the points race as well for the Elite Series. It's really cool to see them adapt, come down south. I had to ask that shad spawn question because it just as much as they have never experienced the shad spawn, I had never experienced that they had never experienced a shad spawn. Like I didn't know. I just thought everybody had a shad spawn. Maybe theirs was only like a day long, but ours is like a month long, at times. So pretty cool to see that learning as you go, even at the semi-pro level.
Yeah, no doubt. And we've talked about it, the amount of guys, adversely that are Southern guys that go up and fish smallmouth tournaments that do really well. Like there's a big group of those guys that fish extremely, extremely well up north fishing for smallmouth. But you think like the learning curve for the things that we just think are normal here in the Southeast, just the South in general, for these guys that fish the Midwest and the North, like it's just not the case. And you don't really like assume that because you're kind of narrow minded in the way you think about fishing, being from the South, Southeast, or in this general region. But yeah, it's really impressive. Like you said, the amount of guys that have came over and had extremely good success. And it seems like that number is just growing and growing.
Yeah, to tell someone that, hey, there's a certain time of year, not quite sure when it exactly will happen this year, but when those bass spawn and they do circles on the bed and they're sitting there and not moving, well, in like a month, these shad are going to flicker on the surface, and that's how they spawn. And it could happen today and it could not happen tomorrow. There's no rhyme or reason why. It could get cooler, it could get warmer, wind, no wind, who knows? And so that is something you're just like, I promise it's not a myth. It actually happens, and it's really fun if you catch it at the right time. So congrats to our 2 champions on this episode of the Opens winning ways. man, our season is going quickly with just a few opens left to decide it. We're excited to see how it plays out in Tennessee, in Missouri, and in Florida for the last 3 opens. But Kyle, appreciate you joining me as always on the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. We'll see you in the next one.